So welcome everybody. I'm Professor Rose Mitriga, but I'm Rose to everybody here basically. My history is in neuroscience, so I'm not a botanist at all, but I'm going to tell you today about a project that's been running here since 2020 in fact, which is very much a citizen science project that the garden's taken on because we want to understand more about phenology. So I know I've talked to a couple of you before people came in about some people know the gardens well. I know some people are completely new to the gardens. Some people come to these talks, some don't. So we've got a really good diverse audience. But I hope some of you walking around the gardens have been here before seeing these signs. So they're on trees that we monitor. So if you're going to go out later afterwards, go and look for these. These are the trees that we're studying. And the reason we've got these put on there, so that everybody knows, particularly the horticultural team. So when they come and look at the tree, they do come and check with us now before they do anything to the tree involved. And I'll show you why a bit later. So this is a phenology project. Have anybody come across that word? It's basically the study of cycles in animals or in plants, but it's actually become much more known as the study of seasonal cycles in plants. So things like flower and leaf development, fruits and fruit ripening, and then leaf tinting and leaf loss at the end of the season. So it's the whole season, if you like. And it's taking place all across the world. Many institutions are doing phenology. A lot of them are professional research institutions, but there are also a lot of citizen science projects. This is something everybody can get involved with. And I will tell you about a way you could all get involved if you want to a bit later on. But here are some of the places that are running phenology projects. And the interesting one for the UK is the Woodland Trust. So they're running something called Nature's Calendar. I don't know if anybody's heard of that at all. It's something you can have an app on your phone and you can actually record your own trees. So they're collecting data from across the UK to understand how the seasons are changing for plants across the UK. It's not only is it running all over the world, it's actually been running for a long time. So there have been studies in Cambridgeshire, and these are historic studies that we've found. Our current, one of our experts in phenology is Tim Sparks, and he and a colleague, Gemma, went and dug out two historical studies that happened just outside of Cambridge. So you can see the first one, 1820 to 1849, was by this chap, Leonard Blumfeld. He's also known as Leonard Jennings. He changed his name partway through his life. And he's a great mate of Henslow. So they were contemporaries. He was a reverend, so he worked at university, but also had his own parish up at Swaff and Balbeck. And he recorded all the plants and the trees and the animals around him where he lived over his life. And then you can see over a century later, a nice farmer called John Clark, living not far from where Leonard Blumfeld had been living, has also did his own recordings. He had his own farm area, but he recorded all the trees and plants in his area. So we've got some lovely data that goes back historically to compare our data with. So lots going on in phenology. Why did we decide to do a project here? Why did we decide to look at the seasonal cycles of our trees and our plants in the gardens? Well, it's quite nice. We've got this big collection and we know lots about them. You've seen all the badges on the trees. They're all linked to database. So all of the trees are recorded. We know where they come from for most of them. We know how they've grown, how old they are, all these things. And it's quite a diverse population. They've been brought in. Some of them are native, some of them are not. So it allows us to look at many different trees, all in a defined area. So that's quite nice for us. It's protected. We shut the gates at night. So, and there aren't too many things that come in into our trees. We do have mudjack, who tend to get shepherded on, but generally it's a very good site. And it's a good way to engage lots of people doing this. And you'll see the volunteer list at the end is very large. We've got lots of people involved and it's fantastic. And that's one of the reasons to tell you about it today, to see if anybody else is interested in getting involved. There are some downsides, there are some cons. It's an urban site, so it's a little bit warmer here than it would be a few miles out of Cambridge. So slightly different temperatures. The trees are planted and the plants are planted quite close together. So there's a bit of pressure on trees for space, for sunlight, for water source and all those things. And of course they're managed. So the staff will go out and water something that looks a bit dry, which is a good thing, but it will affect mainly what we see, and you'll see something later, I'll tell you about that. So they're very good. In most of our trees, they do leave alone, and now we have the badges on. We talk a lot about our trees. So the reason to do this is so you can look at it short term and long term, why it's important. The first thing is just to understand the plants we have. And we do look at a whole variety of plants here in the garden. And the idea is to try and give new information on how to care for them. because we see our trees every week, we do notice a lot of changes, not just the big seasonal changes, but a lot of other things. And probably more importantly is we want to look longer term. Hello, yeah, come on in. Two seats over here. The idea is really to understand climate change and how it's affecting the seasonal cycles. I think most of the people who are my age will notice the change. The things like the bluebells coming 2 or 3 weeks earlier than they did in my childhood, for sure. And we want to understand that. So this project is really looking for a 20-year or longer period, if we can keep it going. We want to feed our data into other places, and Nature's Calendar, the one I told you about, we actually are sharing our data with them. The idea is that we get a much bigger picture of what's going on in the country. And the other thing is to inform the people looking after the garden and make the garden more resilient, so that there's a garden here in 50, 100 years' time, and we don't lose our trees because the climate has changed. So lots of big reasons to do this project. We started out in 2020, and the project wasn't started by me. Chantal Helm was working in the education team, and she and a few university students started to look at what happens in the autumn to some of the trees in the garden. I think their question really was, are trees keeping their leaves longer in the season? And what does that mean if the tree doesn't have this dormant, quiet period where it's resting? What does that mean for the tree? So that was a starting point. So they looked at leaf tinting and leaf loss in about 30 of them, mostly the native trees in the garden. But then I met Chantal at the end of 2021, and we talked about making the project much bigger. And we'd looked at season round measures, so we'd look at spring measures as well. And in April 2022, we took a bit of money to start the project, and we collected a group of volunteers, and we all trained ourselves together and started out. This is when I was completely new to the project and didn't know much about botany. I've learned a lot in a few years. And you can see some of our trees here. And this was one of the very first sessions that we had. These are students, I think I'm hiding in the back somewhere, learning how to read the handkerchief tree with the video, which if you haven't seen it, you need to go and have a look at. We've got one that's still got its flowers on. They look like white handkerchiefs. It's just down the path to the right down there if you want to head out that way afterwards. That's one of our trees on the list. So we've developed, it took about 2 years to establish the project. So probably by 2023, we were getting there. We've gone up to 91 trees. That's quite a lot, but we run 4 different sessions a week where we have different trees. Come on in the second couple of seats, I think. And what we've worked out is actually you need to put more than one individual of each species or taxon that we have in the garden, because different plants in different positions and different plants of the same species might be doing slightly different things. And if you only look at one, you only see one small picture. We go out every week, rain or shine. I've got a great picture to show you later. And we record everything on a tree. So we look at what the tree's doing. Most phenology, most projects around the world will just look at the first events. So when is the first flower there? We'll record that. And then they won't record flowers again. What we do, because we look every week, we try and work out how our trees are changing. So we'll go a week and we'll say, oh, 5% of our flowers are out. And then next week it might be 20%. And so we try and keep sort of a numeric values going. So we're trying to work out how our trees are changing over time. I've got some data to show you later, a few graphs. And we look at 5 main things: leaf development, flower development, the fruit ripening, the leaf tinting, and the leaf loss. And we do that on all 90 trees. They're quite diverse. Things like fruit are very different on our trees. Some are proper fruits, like plums, you can see. Some of them are nuts, some of them are seeds that float around. So we have to be quite adaptable how we store things. This is our kit. I've brought a bit of kit so you can look. Some high-tech, some less high-tech. So the good thing about the plants always being labelled is we can make, they're all in a database. I can make a map where the plants are. So that's our Friday list. So about 45 names on that right-hand side. And what we do is we make a circuit. We start with 2 teams. We start at the same point and we go around in a loop and we meet where we meet. It depends on how fast the teams work as to where we meet, but that's we do our strategy. We've got clipboards, we've got lists, so you can come and have a look at the list of the trees if you want to afterwards. Very important piece of equipment because we do a lot of trees and the binoculars. Can't see the big trees. You have to go look at. I don't know if you can see from here actually. There's a very big tree just here, the tulip tree. It's got its flowers in there. It's absolutely beautiful, but you might need the binoculars. So maybe we should go out afterwards with the binoculars and have a look at those flowers. They're fantastic. And sometimes we have to get up close as well, so we get our little eye specs out and have a look at what things are going, particularly if you've got little bugs and animals crawling on trees. We like to have a look at those. We've got lots of volunteers that are interested in the bugs. Anybody guess what the stick's for?
Grabbing a branch.
Absolutely, pulling a branch down. So some of our trees are quite tall. We've got the large trees in there. We need a stick to help us look a bit closer. How rough is our fruit, for instance, you can't see. So we go out with all this kit every week. We started on paper. So this is a list of trees. Each line is at a tree. You can see the numbers there we were scoring for different values and a few comments. But then I was writing, obviously, copying it to the computer. So it's very labour intensive. And then we found this fantastic program. This is a free app that anybody can have on their own phone if they wanted to. But you can design a form where you can record everything. And the best bit about it is you can take pictures through this app and they're linked to the data that you have. So every week we take about up to 5 pictures on every tree. And that's all stored in a lovely cloud somewhere else. So we don't have to store it all. We get links to it. So we can recall that data and I can download it into a spreadsheet so we can put things. So it's a brilliant app and it's worked very well for us. We started off with quite random list of trees and we refined it to really think about why we should have the trees on the list because we could only do about 90, it's our limit. So we've tried to do more native trees because we want to know what's happening to our UK trees so we can feed into a bigger UK picture, if you like. We've tried to make more replicas, as I told you before. But the other thing we're interested in is this garden. We've got some trees that are growing well within their climate range. They're a UK tree and they like Cambridge and it's a nice climate for them. But we've got some that either come from northern places or mountainous places. So it's quite warm here, warm here compared to what they're used to. And then we've got lovely Asian trees and things that for them, the winters are quite cold here. So we've got a real range. So we pick trees from each of those different categories so we can see how they change with our Cambridge climate as it changes. And occasionally the trees are refined for us. So you get acute weather effects. This is a frost. So this tree is a lovely Australian shrub that was outside the glass houses. This was the winter of 2022 when we had the really -12 at night. And so that's November picture and that's a mid-December picture. So we lost that tree that year. So that one was off the list. Bit more dramatic. I actually went away this week. I went on holiday and I was sent to me by one of the team. So we've got one less tree to do now. This is a lovely lime tree, if anybody remembers. It's near to the old entrance to the garden and it was dangerous. It was splitting in the middle, so it had to be taken away. And this is before we had the badges, so we didn't know about this. So it's quite a surprise to find that one Friday. But mostly we have control of our trees. So this is where we are at the moment. We've got about 5 years of autumn data for about between 80 and 30 plants. We've got 3 full seasons of data now for 90 plants, which is great. And that's about 40,000 recordings. That's the numbers that we collect and then comments that we make. And thousands of images to go with that. So it's a big database that we're creating. And we're just starting to look at the analysis. So it's very early days because you can't see a lot of things in a few years. And hopefully that'll become obvious to you for a few reasons. You get a lot of variation. I've got fantastic volunteers. Some of them are specialists in different things. And I've had 2 chaps, James Moonall and Nathan Clark, who are very good at IT. So Jane's been doing a lot of the imaging for us, and Nathan was doing a lot of the numbers and working for the numbers in the early days. And so hopefully this works. So everyone else happy. These are pictures that James has overlaid to see by time. So each week there's a new picture that comes up as a short video clip. This is the wisteria that's just around the corner of the shop here. And this one's not so clear, but you can see the changes over time. You look at the wisteria here, you see the flowers come, and then the other bush around the side, the shrub that's got you see the leaves coming out. Up there again, you can see. So we can do this with our controller. This one is one of our giant redwoods, and this sequoia that we've got. And this is lovely. This is leaf tinting. So that's full summer. And then as you go into the autumn, notice the blue sky, they're not nice days. You can see the trees changing, going darker, the leaves are tinting here. And when you get to this stage, the leaves have actually gone, and that orange, those are the male catkins, the male flowers that are sitting there at the end of the season, waiting over winter to open up in the spring. So this is a very nice way of looking at things. So lots of nice pictures, but a lot of work to do this. More of what we've done is looking at making graphs and looking at data. Okay, that's all right. So because it's a science talk, I have to show you a little bit of data for those who are interested. So I'll just pick out a few things to show you some examples of what we're seeing. So first of all, spring measures, the leaves coming out or the flowers coming out. Just before I start though, does anybody know what this flower is in the middle at the top here? Well, I tell you, it's about half the size of my thumbnail, probably. It's very small. It's on a very common tree, but it's one that I had to learn when I did this project. It's hazel. So that's the female hazel flower. So you know the hazel has lovely male catkins that everybody can see. Those are much harder to see. So next spring, if you haven't seen one, go and have a look. They're absolutely beautiful. They're like small anemones. But quite a lot of our wind pollinated trees have very small flowers like that. That's one of my favourites. So in terms of flowers, what we can do is match our pictures to what we see. So the 4 pictures on the right are the same year. This is our horse chestnut tree. So this is one sitting around behind the cafe. And you can see from the 14th of April through to the 20th of May, how the flowers develop. We've got lovely pictures there to show you. But this is what we've recorded on there. So the blue line is the flower buds first, when they first open. And the red line is when the flowers are fully open, and you can see all the flower parts, the petals are fully open. And you can see that they track very nicely. The buds come out, of course, a little bit earlier than the full flower. And you get this up and down because not all the flowers are fully open at the same time. So you often don't reach 100% of the flowers opening because the flowers come sequentially. If you go out and look at the horse chestnut, they're a great tree because their flowers, some of them are looking pink and some are looking yellow. Have you noticed that? Anybody looked close to the flowers? Does anybody know why that might be?
Because you do pollination.
Absolutely, it's to do with pollination. So the flowers start off pink, and is that the right way around? And then they go yellow when they're pollinated. Is it the way other way around? Other way around, absolutely. So it's because the pollinators see one colour better than the other, and so the flower switches off and turns from turns into colour when it's been pollinated. So the trees are very clever. So some of our plants, we've got more than one individual. They look very similar when you map what happens to them. So this is flower budburst in hawthorns, Catagus monogyna, and you can see that each of those colours on the lines are a different plant, but their flower budburst is absolutely accurate. You see the timer on the bottom, and they're all bursting at about the same time in the season. It's lovely when we have data like that. I have to say, very little of our data looks as good as that. So there's a lot more variation, and that's one of the reasons. What we see is different changes between years. So this is leaf developed now, and this is one of our common oaks, Crocus roba. This is one by the cafe actually. And the 2 pictures we're looking at are the same week in 2022 and 2023. And hopefully you can see on the left there's lots of nice green leaves. On the right hand side over here, the leaves don't look as open. And that you can see on the graph here. So the 2 blue lines are the leaf buds bursting in 2 different minutes, and the 2 green lines are the leaves fully open. So I'll show you on this point here. See if I can move my cursor. There we go. So this is 2022, and you can see at this point in time, there are a lot more leaves bursting open than around 2023. And then if you look at this point in time, this is a lot of leaves fully open in 2022 and less in 2023. It's basically showing you that that tree, that oak tree, its leaves are opening later in the spring in 2022 than they are in 2022. So there's lots of talk in the papers about everything happening earlier. We don't always see that with all of our trees. It's much more related to what's happening probably around the time for that tree. So this is why you need 20 years. You need to get rid of all that variation to actually see real patterns emerging. So that's a little bit about spring. Summer's a good time and all the fruit ripening. So I don't know how many of these fruits you know. You can see our fruits are very different. This is the larch, this is the cones on the right-hand side here. The bottom one there, that's the Californian chestnut hiding in its shell. And the bottom middle one's a magnolia. And that bulging one, the lovely pink one, is a fertilized fruit in the magnolia. So you'll see those on the trees out around here if you look for those in the autumn. So here's an example where the different plants of the same species in the same year ripen their fruit at different times. So we see some of this pattern. So you can see it's a little bit noisy and our scoring isn't perfect. We don't have these perfectly straight lines all the time. We spend a lot of time standardizing. But this is the Cornelian cherry or Cornus mass. The lovely big trees that are out of the, further down in the garden. And you can see 3 different lines. The fruit is ripening, the percentage of ripe fruit is different at different times. So it's just in the same year, this is again 2022, I think. So even though those trees are all quite close together in the garden, they're doing things at slightly different times. When we get to autumn, we've got the lovely colouring. It's one of the best times to be in the garden, lovely trees with beautiful colours. This is our tulip tree again, the one that you can see out the window, and it's got beautiful autumn colours. And it's quite nice, you can see a lot from the whole tree pictures. When you stand back a bit and look at these, you really get a sense of what's going on. Here's just to show you leaf loss. This is it's the same oak tree when it's dropping its leaves. So we try and score how many leaves are dropped, and that's quite complicated. Sometimes we look at the ground and say, okay, there's leaves on the ground. Sometimes somebody's come and clean them up because they're on the path. So you don't always get a good measure of that. So you have to come week on week to really understand your trees and keep an eye on what's going on. But this is another way of looking at how leaves, this is leaf tinting. This is a lovely big Indian bean tree that's sitting outside Phenology, just a little white building there. And here you can see 4 years now, what's going on. And you can see different things happening at different years. So if you look down the column, it goes from September to December, and then each of the columns represents a year. The colour shows you how much tinting, and the width of the bar shows you how much tinting as well. So when you've got a lovely big red bar here, that means 100% of that tree is tinted. And hopefully you can see that they start at different times. So in 2020 and 2021, it was quite late around November, you saw a lot of tinting, and then we saw much more in October in the later 2 years, in 2022 and 2023. So again, variation year on year, different patterns, different trees are showing different patterns. It's very, very variable. And the same as with leaf loss. This is a lovely beech tree, again, not far from the cafe. And I thought I'd tell you about our sycamore tree that's standing outside. But lovely sycamore. I like the one in the Sycamore Gap. It's a beautiful tree. We're taking good care of ours. And this is showing you the number of leaves remaining in time. So on the bottom, you've got to see from July over to December. Each of the lines represents a year. And hopefully you can see there's 3 that are together, and that's 2020, 2023 and 2024, when the leaves were dropping about the same time, in October, November time. And then in 2 years, 2021 and 2022, much later, weeks later, that tree held on to its leaves. So it's not generally, you're seeing a shift always to being earlier or a shift to always being later in trees. You see a lot of variation. And this is why long-term data is important. I think I've got something to show you which explains that in a little bit in a different way. So we've got 30 trees, we've got about 4 years of data on. And some they show different patterns. So here's one pattern where you can see in 2020, this is the amount of leaves remaining on the trees was quite low in most of these trees, but then over the years, it has got higher, which means those trees are holding on to their leaves longer. So they are showing this shift over time, which is what climate change people are predicting. That's very clear. You can see there's 3 alder trees, 1 oak, 1 birch, and 1 hazel in that group. A lot of our native trees holding their leaves longer. That's very interesting. But of those 30 trees, that's 6. Here are another 6. And you can see 1 year they're dropping their leaves early, next year they're holding on to their leaves, and it's completely up and down. Interestingly, not so many of our native trees in this group. Most of these trees are non-natives. So they might respond differently to the same weather in the garden as native trees. That's sort of tantalising, interesting information. Don't know what it means yet. But so we're going to have to unpick this. We have to be very careful what we compare with what. You can find a lot of interesting things in your data, but you have to make sure you're comparing things in a way that makes sense, that's not giving you an impression that's false, if that makes sense. One thing that a lot of people think about is that you can have frost. Is that what drops of leaves? You know, that's what's thought to be true. So we've got weather data in the garden, we've got fantastic weather station. We've got lots of air temperature, soil temperature, water levels, rainfall, all of those things. So this is just one to show you the air temperature change, and that's the dotted orange line at the bottom. So it's running from 1st of September to the 20th of December in 2023. And you can see the temperature gradually going down to the line 0. And here you've got a few frosts where the air temperature is going below 0, if you like, in that orange line. And then I've got 5 trees plotted on there that are showing leaf loss. We'll talk about the light blue one later, but we've got 3 over here that are doing things a bit later, and they might be responding to this low temperature. You can see they've got quite a few leaves here, and then we've got 3 or 4 frosts in a row, and they seem to be dropping their leaves. Whereas the yellow and the blue one here have got their leaves before it's got very cold. So you can't always say that frost are driving the leaf loss. It may be other things as well. At least from this data from a few trees for 1 year, this is why you have to be very careful. It's just a few trees. The light blue one is the horse chestnut. Probably ignoring this bit where somebody was a bit wild with their recording. If you imagine that dot's not there, you can see it goes quite early, the blue one. Does anybody know why the horse chestnuts drop their leaves quite early? Probably a lot of you have seen this out in your trees that you walk past. You've seen them go very brown quite early in the summer. With disease, yeah, it did. It's actually a leaf miner. It's a little moth that gets in and lays its eggs, and then the leaf miners eat inside the leaves and bring the leaves down. So a horse chestnut is doing something that's driven by animals. And we do try and keep a record of the animals that we see on the trees, at various forms. Some of them are good for the trees, some of them don't do any harm, and some of them do some harm. So we do at least keep a record of what we see there. So hopefully I've sort of told you the variability can be all kinds of things. I haven't talked about the plants. It depends how big they are, how mature they are. Most trees don't do normal things until they're about 30 because they're growing and doing all kinds of other things. Also depends how healthy they are as well. We keep an eye on that. But they can be get too much exposure if they're out on their own. But some of our trees here are actually competing with each other because they're planted quite closely as well. That might change things. Some of our trees get watered, some don't, and some will get watered if they're in distress. So that varies. Weather, of course, is in the climate is huge. Human intervention might come and chop a few limbs off actually and that will change what the tree does potentially. One of our challenges is how we can see the tree. So we've got the binoculars, but it's still not great. And this is an alder tree down the bottom of the garden. The picture's taken the same day. This was by us as observers, and this was by Pete in information team with his drone. We went up to the top and looked at the crown. I think you can see here, it's very hard to see what's going on up there, but here you can see lots of lovely catkins. So sometimes we have to try and use these to work out what's going on in our trees to get a very accurate measure of the whole tree. And of course, as you see, the noise in the grass, so we have some recorded variation, and we try and standardise. We all look at the same trees every week to try and to keep that as minimal as possible. I think the last thing to tell you is that we see extreme weather effects, definitely. So we had a drought in 2022. I think probably most people remember it. The garden got really dry. And this is the lovely handkerchief tree. So hopefully you can see the white here of the flower bracts. So making these beautiful white handkerchief-like things, hence the name, the video. On the picture on the left, that's the beginning of August, it dropped all its leaves. So it just had leaves at that point in August. It dropped everything. It was a bare tree. At the end of August, it went, oh, I'll have another season now. I think it got watered. I think rather than rain, I think that actually that one did get watered because it looked very sick. And it had new leaves and new flowers. So it had a complete second season. And what was noticed with those two trees is the branches. So one of the trees, only part of the branches dropped leaves. And it did fine in 2023. In 2024, it didn't look as healthy on those areas. So some trees are long-lived, sometimes they don't show effects of climate until 7 years down the line. Another reason to keep going with recording. So just a few conclusions. We've got an established project now. It's great fun, but we're going to need a lot more data. I hope you've shown you there's lots of variation. Interesting things in there, but not a lot of conclusions we can draw at the moment. And we think that's partly the collection is managed, but it's partly, all kinds of things to do with our trees. A few interesting things are coming out. It'll be interesting to see if our native trees keep holding their leaves longer. That's something we're going to follow up. And the project's really become much more than just recording the seasonal cycle now. So we've got a fantastic group of volunteers. We've all learned a lot from each other. We have different experts. We've got a lady who's dissected every bud of every tree to look for us, to tell us whether they're leaf buds or flower buds, when they might come, what they look like over winter, all kinds of things. We've got IT specialists, all kinds of things like that. And the fun thing is actually getting other people involved and telling people about this so that you go out and look in your own neighbourhoods. And I do recommend having a look at Nature's Calendar at the website and seeing if there's a tree that you fast recording that you might walk past regularly, and then downloading the app and having a go, or uploading, recording your own data. It's not always sunny, but people are still smiling. We've got a great group of a team, and most of the team have been coming for the 3 years I've been doing it. It's a really nice community. So we plan to keep going as long as we can. We're feeding back into the staff at the gardens as well. And we're trying to share our data where we can as well. The idea is to make this as publicly accessible as possible. So that's it. I think it was just the acknowledgements. So Chantal started the project, and Sam, Peter, Margot, and the curation team have been looking after me and the team. And as you can see, we've had a lot of volunteers over the years, probably between about 16 and 20 people at any time. Some of the students have been and left, but you can see we're a good group of people from all walks of life who come and join in. And we've had a bit of funding to get going from the Cambridge University collections of communities, and then the gardens really supported us since then. So that's probably all I have to say. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to have some questions.